Welcome, Scorpio, to a new cosmic chapter. Saturn, the planet which governs time, boundaries, and structures, moves into the sixth house of your personal solar chart, but the first zodiac sign of Aries, where it begins a new 29 and a quarter year journey. It briefly visited last year from the 25th of May for just over 3 months, which gave us a little bit of a taster pack. But now, for the next 2 years, Saturn is in Aries full time. What's the implications for you? Sixth house can be very much to do with everyday structures and routines, but it can also be to do with things like uh, our diet, our exercise, and nutrition. Saturn can be tough. We know that. It asks us to work hard. But I'm going to share with you not just how Saturn in the sixth house is going to be for you, but the event chart. And here we can look at how the other planetary players will feed into this event and provide a backdrop for you personally over the next 2 years. I'll then share with you the upcoming influences, the Saturn retrograde, which is for 5 months from the 26th of July. And I'm also going to give you the opportunity to download a guide to help you to navigate Saturn's journey through this sign. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundel, a very warm welcome. If you're a returning visitor, your views, comments, and likes are truly appreciated. I have been getting quite a few hypes lately. If that's you, thank you. And if you're new here, thank you for joining us. And if you've yet to subscribe, please help the channel to continue to thrive and do so now. Now, whenever we look at a chart like we are here, it's important to be mindful of the player that's most northerly in the chart. And because Saturn has that reputation for restriction and difficulty, it's ironic that Jupiter, the planet of opportunity, is in that most northerly position for you, the ninth house. So the ninth house can be quite cavalier. It's about trying different approaches, being very independent minded, and breaking out of set routines. And opposite that is the moon in Capricorn, which really appreciates a safety first approach. But it does mean across the ninth and the third houses that your communication is going to be critical over the next couple of years, but most of all, your enthusiasm, because you have a reputation, Scorpio, of being very deep and it's well founded. And your two rulers are together in the sign of Aquarius, modern Pluto and traditional Mars in that fourth house. And that fourth house is where we gain that sense of personal safety. So it can be to do with our home, our family relationships. But the host, Aquarius, is asking you to look at things afresh. And ironically, perhaps the most challenging aspect in this event chart is that Uranus, the planet of higher truth, disruption, and freedom, is in the seventh house of your chart in a square with the sun in Aquarius. So if there is a family or home-based relationship which does feel somewhat claustrophobic, that may be something that does get challenged over the next couple of years. But in a much more positive way, you have a delightful collective in the sign of Pisces, which shares your water tropicity, but particularly Mercury may be technically not at its best in Pisces, but for you, this is very playful, demonstrative. So the position of Uranus in your sector of relationships suggests that you could encounter someone new who comes into your life, creates a lot of excitement, but that could in some ways require you to flex and try different things. And that in itself may be why keeping the lines of communication open are so important for you. But Saturn itself, the sixth house, can be about things like responsibilities, obligations, your physical well-being. And that's why taking a fresh look at what you're eating and drinking could be very important because Saturn can be very scrutinizing. Neptune, however, and of course the two are going to meet in an exact conjunction on the 20th, can be rather shape shifting and it can be difficult to perhaps really grapple with details because Neptune, in some ways, may create another kind of dimension. In other words, we could kid ourselves about what we might be doing with some of our daily habits that aren't necessarily of the best. So Neptune can also be a little bit about escapism. So I think you're really being asked to think about where you could be more conscientious and virtuous, and not choose not to look at certain things. Now, the sixth house can also be about work. And if you're wanting to change what you do for a living, I think that collective in Pisces are saying you want to do something more creative. And, even with Jupiter in the ninth house, perhaps involving travel in some way or another. But because the fourth house energies are very, very strong, coming back into your home place, or if you are moving around, being in a home which gives you a real sense of personal security and stability, will still be very strong. But if you are someone who's been finding a routine job a little dull and predictable, I think you're perhaps going to consider doing something from home, perhaps collaborating with someone. And if it is going to enable you to be more imaginative, but you can uh, uh, create something that has a tangible benefit to people, that's the sixth house, that can all work very well. So, to boil it all down, I think the next couple of years are asking you to take care of your physical well being by cutting out things that maybe are good as a treat, but if they become a little bit routine or habitual, I've been trying my best with ice cream and chocolate to really cut them down. And, once I have, it's actually, it's not so bad once you get beyond that initial period. But if you are wanting to do something that gives you a sense of personal satisfaction by helping people, I think it does need to have a creative dimension to it as well, but it could be in your local vicinity in some way or another. Now, in terms of the upcoming aspects, there are some quite powerful ones. So on March the 8th, Venus applies to Saturn in that sixth house. If you're in a relationship and you tend to do the heavy lifting around the domestic chores, that could be creating resentment by that time if your diplomacy to try and get a partner to do their bit is not really materializing. But equally, it could be a partner asking you to do more. Then again, if there is someone you encounter in a very everyday situation romantically, don't discount it. But the 25th of March sees Saturn uh, being applied to by the Sun. And if there is a job you like and you want to go for, I think this can be very positive for you because it can help you to organize yourself in a very efficient way to reach out to make the pitch. But on March the 28th, Saturn links brilliantly with Pluto. And if you are wanting to refine your home space, uh, perhaps decluttering, moving furniture around, making it leaner, it's not so much about having lots of items and clutter. It's more about just having it functional. That can really call out to you, I feel, Scorpio. But on the 19th of April, there is a conjunction between your traditional ruler Mars and Saturn. And if there is something that you're wanting to get much more virtuous around, and you're doing more walking or running or swimming, just don't push too hard, but you really can show a lot of endurance around that time. But on July the 6th, and also towards the end of the year, we have two squares. So the sun at that time for you initially is in the ninth house, which is about freedom, where Jupiter is, and maybe wanting to break out and do your own thing. And Saturn's reminding you in the sixth house of your duty that could create resentment. The same thing can happen later in the year. Maybe it's your nervous energy that gets crunched a little bit by trying to pack too much into your day. So that gives you a flavour of that. The retrograde begins on the 26th of July. And as ever, when Saturn retrogrades do start, the following 5 months, I think, will be a time when refinement is going to be even more important. Don't take shortcuts. It's important to get to sleep early and eat the right things, hydrate properly, and even if that's something that at times may seem a little dull, it could really call out to you. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you're a pet lover and you don't currently have one, although pets can obviously have an impact on our freedom to go off and do what we want when we want, if you really love an animal, I think Saturn being Aries may give you the desire to take on the responsibility. And also, intriguingly, the sixth house can be about aunts and uncles. If you have got an aunt or uncle, they could be someone who features a lot more powerfully in your life this year. Now, you can download a free guide to negotiate Saturn in Aries underneath this video, but also check out your February forecast, please, because we do have an incredibly powerful solar eclipse on the 17th. We also have your traditional ruler Mars being crunched by Uranus in the last week, but a fabulous link between the two planets of fortune in the last week of February too. So check that out because that's much more detailed and will help you to just integrate this switch with Saturn. Because I feel that perhaps when it did come through last summer in the north and last winter in the south, you may have found that something became a bit more challenging. Now, one of the intriguing things about the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune on the 20th of February at 0 degrees is that 0 degrees is the vernal point, so the start of the zodiac. It's where on the spring equinox the whole journey begins again. So having the combination between Saturn and Neptune there is particularly intriguing to me because there's a form of astrology called Draconic astrology, where the North Node is moved from wherever it is in the natal chart to 0 degrees Aries. And that can change a chart quite a bit. But the person I want to give you a little bit of an insight to of how this works is Madonna. So on the screen is Madonna's nativity, and she was a Leo. So obviously, a person who's a performer has to have a degree of glow and radiance and magnetism, and having the sun, but also Uranus in the sign of Leo, along with Venus. Venus, I think, is the love of theatrics. Uranus is the confidence to be different. I think the sun being in the third decan of the sign of Leo, subruled by Mars, is the passion, but also a bit more edge. You can also see when it comes to the edge that Uranus and Mars are in a square. So that gives this person an appreciation of being provocative. Mars is the most prominent planet in the whole chart. So it is going to be very important. It's about pushing boundaries. However, if we dive a little deeper, that cluster of energy in her 12th house points towards someone who could think about things very deeply. Obviously, with the Virgo ascendant and the moon on it, someone who has a great appreciation of their immediate environment. But I feel that's the side of Madonna that has a real interest in psychology, healing, and anything to do with mythology and things like the Kabbalah. And in terms of her success, I feel that's driven a lot by the Sun and Jupiter being in a wonderful sextile, so potentially very fortunate. But if we look at that North Node, which I mentioned before, for her it's on a fixed star called Speaker, Spica, and people with planets on Speaker tend to be very prominent, can be hugely successful, and build up a big following. So the combination between the North Node and Jupiter suggests her life karma, her direction of travel, the North Node, has been about finding balance, interest in the arts, but definitely an ability to make money. So that's her natal chart. But let's look at Madonna's Draconic chart. So remember, the North Node is at 2402 in her natal. We go to a Draconic, and there is the North Node at 0 degrees Aries on the exact degree that this Saturn Neptune conjunction is happening. And that's why I wanted to tell you about it. Now, when I did share Madonna's chart a few years ago and said that she was a Leo, I had loads of people write to me and say, no, she's not, she's an Aquarius. But clearly, she is a Leo because she's born on the 16th of August. But in the Draconic version of the chart, her sun is on the anaretic degree of Capricorn. So this is a person with a real instinct for business, but also perhaps with the flavor of progressiveness that comes from Aquarius energy, which is the combination still of Pluto and Mercury, very analytical, but uh, the combination of the ascendant and the moon in Aquarius is very much more to do with being groundbreaking than the Virgo in her natal chart, which can be someone who wants to provide services, is very detail orientated, very organized. She may be all of those things, but in this chart, the more radical part of her nature really is that much more visible. She still has the need to perhaps be more meditative, quiet, take time out of the limelight with the 12th house energy. And also, Saturn in the fourth house means that, you know, home and family is important to her. And I think it's right that she's adopted some children. So that shows a great responsibility and a great empathy to look after those who are less fortunate. But that combination of the planets stay in the same relationship, so we have the same aspect. We still have Uranus in a square with Mars, but Mars here is also very close to Speaker in the nature chart. So as Mars, Draconic, conjunct the North Node and Jupiter in her natal. And, you know, the ninth house is about expansion, it's about risk, independence. Uh, it is true that Mars is technically detrimented, but in this illustration, you can see that the Moon and Mars still very strong, so she's a great communicator. So, what the principles of Draconic astrology are is that they're the root of who we are. So, when we come into this world, Draconic's the root of our personality, and the natal is the fruit that comes from the tree of life that we go through. So, if we really work at it, we can see the outcome of our life physical journey much more like the natal chart. But some people find the Draconic chart represents their personalities much more. For example, my Draconic midpoint, sun and moon, is Cancer, you know, and I am very much a home lover. And people who are close to me, been close to me for a very long time, you know, I value those relationships very much. So, if you'd like to understand the difference between your natal chart and your Draconic chart, just like I've shared for Madonna, you can order your Draconic 12-month forecast and get your character analysis, your Draconic Life Roadmap report. And if you apply Draco 26 at the checkout, you'll get 50% off. But also, if you would like to order your natal 12-month forecast and natal life roadmap report, if you apply Astro 26 at the checkout, you can get 50% off for those too.